Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of My Antics. Over the last few months, I've had a lot of reoccurring questions from my Facebook group, United States Ant Keepers. From here, I am going to make this video about the 5 most common mistakes made by new or experienced ant keepers to this day. Without further ado, let's get into the mix. Number 5. Leaving your queens alone. I'm sure some of you are laughing right now because you know, if you're like me anyways, you look at your queens more than the recommended once or twice a week. Which is completely understandable because when you're a new ant keeper, you want nothing more than your colony to succeed, and you want to be there for every second of it while it happens. On the flip side though, every time you put her into the light, or you move her around in unnatural movements, say to pick up their test tube for example, you're throwing off her mojo, her vibe, her dedication to her nest, and you're scaring her to the point where she completely forgets that she's working on having a colony and she's just worried for her own life. Down the road, you will build a bond with your ants, and there will even be a point in time when you'll be able to watch them all day, every day, until your heart's content. But in the beginning, do your best to leave them alone. You can cheer for them quietly across the room if it makes you feel better. One last thing, every time you take your colony out, do one thing beneficial for them. Don't just take them out to look at them for an hour. Take them out to feed them, to clean their test tubes out, to check their water and food, give them honey. Whatever it may be, make sure that you're doing something beneficial for them before you put them away. That way you don't feel so bad when you do look at them that extra couple of times. Number 4. Moving your colonies into a nest too early. Even with the founding chamber of the queens, it takes her a long time to get used to the area. Queens have to lay down multiple layers of pheromones to understand that this is their home base, their main nest, and even when the NonNative come into play, they never really leave this area. Eventually, they have enough workers where they start venturing out for food and adding on to their space. But for us ant keepers, there's a lot of a different scenario that could happen for this. Taking your queens out of a test tube too early and placing them into an formicarium nest is way too much space for them. They can't handle it. And the negative impacts can be far worse than them just eating their brood. They can adapt so poorly that they could die from the overwhelming space of the nest. So it's never a good idea to put them in unless they have 15, 20, or even 30 plus workers depending on how long you want to wait. Number 3. Hibernating your queens. Queens in the northern region, or even the Midwest of the United States, need to hibernate because it's built in to their internal hardware, per se. It's a time for queens to take a break. Stop laying eggs, stop foraging, and just take a long needed rest, which I'm sure you all agree that ants do need at one point or another. Not giving them the chance to hibernate decreases their lifespan and makes them have to work harder at times they should not be. Learning how to properly hibernate your colony is definitely extremely useful when the time comes around, and if you truly care about your ants, it's something that we all should do. I recommend looking into the refrigerator version, where you put your colonies in the fridge, you gradually cool them off over the course of a couple of weeks, and then you leave them there for 3 to 5 months. And this gives you a chance to take a break from them as well. Sometimes ant keepers do need a break away from their colonies to make sure that the ant keeping experience stays fresh, and I highly recommend that you do so. Number 2. Lack of research. When you got into the ant keeping hobby, I bet you were reading every article and watching every video you could about ant keeping. But as you move forward with the colonies that you have, you forget that research is what got you to where you are. Also, having a good community to remind you is a big factor as well. But don't lose that first excitement of ant keeping where you were doing all the researching and you became an ant professor per se, and when you were looking into everything that you needed to know and more. This especially comes into play when you get new species into your collection. Trying to wing it with information that works for other species may not be best suited for a new species that you have now. Every individual species has its own care sheet, and if you try to do one thing one way when it should have been another, you could end up with a negative experience. So I highly recommend looking up every species that you have individually and making your own care sheet. Number 1. Obtaining non-native exotic species to your country. I hear ant keepers talk about it all the time. They talk about the huge size, the big jaws, and the exotic colors that you may not have in your country. The best thing we can do is adore them from afar. Not only is it highly illegal to bring them from country to country, but remember, you're taking them out of their natural habitat that they have been evolving in for millions of years and trying to recreate it poorly in your own house. Not only is the chance of you succeeding slim to none, but you don't know what that colony might be bringing with them that you don't want. You may have parasites, fungus, and bacteria that your native colonies could catch and they're not used to having. Enough said, it could devastate your ant room. If you do have a passion for non-native exotic species, you can research them and learn everything there is about them, but keep them out of your collection. In general, there are a lot of different subjects I could have touched on for the 5 mistakes that ant keepers make. For example, never feed any of your inside colonies outside insects. This goes without saying, but there could be harmful parasites, fungus, or bacteria on these critters that you're feeding to your colony, spreading it throughout your ant room. If you must feed any kind of outside bug to your colony, remember to boil it, bake it, or freeze it beforehand, hopefully killing any kind of bacteria, mold, or mites that may be on them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for today. Those are my 5 mistakes commonly made by new or experienced ant keepers. Comment down below what kind of videos you'd like to see next. We have a handful of ideas that are coming from my Facebook community, but I'd like to hear about you, the YouTube family members as well. Alright boys and girls, take it easy.
Happy